All right, we're live. This is exciting.
Yeah. Yay
Yay.
to the gods of the internet.
I know, right? The internet is our friend. Hey, friends, I'm so excited to be live with you guys today. Many of you are probably wondering, what are you guys doing? A marathon? Absolutely. This would not be the work, though, if I did not do it in community with my dear friend, sister, partner, coach, collaborator, Brigette. Oh my gosh. Yes, Brigette. Let's talk a little bit about my friend Brigette. She is an international speaker and business coach. She helps disruptive coaches, healers, and experts to increase their income and impact and total integrity. She creates inclusive and engaging events that inspire and connect value driven business leaders from a widely diverse backgrounds. Bridgette's mission is to disrupt BS in the coaching and conscious business space. She is committed to supporting partnership and authentic connections across diverse communities. Bridget, thanks for hanging out with us on Live Into the Work. How are you today?
I am feeling good. I'm happy to be here with you as always. I love being in your energetic space. Sometimes I just get excited when my phone rings and it's you. I'm feeling good today. I had a great call this morning with the speakers for my event, and I felt a huge sense of gratitude, just like I feel now, to be surrounded by other incredible women leaders taking a stand and doing great work. And right now, I know it's part of what's lifting me and holding me up. Like, there's no doubt about it. If I wasn't around folks like you and all the other women we're in community with, it would not feel manageable.
Wow. Thank you, Bridget, I appreciate that. Um, I really want to ask you what inspired you to get into your work, right? To go into being kind of like a disruption coach.
Yeah. Well, I guess it starts with my mom. My mom was born in Puerto Rico, and because I'm half Boricua, I'm half Italian, and my mom was a big influence on my life. On the one hand, she drove me crazy because she had no filter and she didn't care what anybody thought, and she said what she needed to say. And so we had like a classic kind of conflicted mother daughter relationship in that, like, I love my mother dearly, but we battled and we duked it out. But as I got older, I really started to understand my mom's particular form of wisdom in not giving a fuck, that she lived for herself, for a woman of her generation, for a Puerto Rican woman, very much a liberated existence
Hmm.
in some ways. And then in other ways, she lived an existence burdened by a lot of the typical intergenerational trauma and pain and experiences of loss and lack that come with coming from a very large Puerto Rican family. And so for me, a lot of my own influence in the work has come from my own childhood, growing up at the intersection of being privileged, being white skinned and half Italian, and being keenly aware of like all the things and all the opportunities and all the access that that side of my family had. And also like really feeling into the distinct experience of my Puerto Rican family and my cousins who were Morena, who are actually African of descent, that have different features, different skin color, and had really different life outcomes and different journeys and experiences, not because they were born with anything lesser than I was born with, right? But
Hmm.
because of the circumstances of their lives. And, my mom coming from a family of nine, a lot of things that I learned about were from firsthand experience, like things like young people getting incarcerated because they didn't have access to adequate representation and they were at the wrong place at the wrong time, or they were just trying to fit in a community where gangs were rampant and they had to hold on to a gun to look like they were like, say, cool. Didn't actually do anything really that big of a deal. I mean, it wasn't a smart thing, but got in a lot of trouble, a lot more trouble than I think I would have gotten into as a kid. So just kind of growing up with that duality has made me really think about what is my role in the
Hmm.
work that I do, and how, and it's not simplistic, right? Because it's like, how do I navigate the duality of those two identities? And then for me, I guess the culmination of seeing kind of the distinctive life paths of my families was when my mom had a massive stroke when I was pregnant with my first daughter. And her stroke was as a result of a lifetime of obesity and undiagnosed depression. And as I got older, I learned that my mom had been a victim of childhood sexual abuse and that it had never been acknowledged by the family. And just so many things were layers of trauma that had been buried. And that ultimately resulted in my mom experiencing the loss of all of her ability to care for herself. And then myself being an only child, needing to like step up and step into this new life that I had that was partly taking responsibility for my elder, and then noticing what was coming up for me in terms of feeling a sense of responsibility and guilt about taking care of her, but also wanting to like disrupt the pattern of intergenerational lack and trauma and have a better life for myself. And this is
Mhm.
kind of this, again, this nuance
Yeah.
is what I'm always navigating, like as even a business coach, you know, how do I get to have a good life, right, and
Yeah.
serve and benefit from it while also really being aware that my particular path and journey is not the norm. It's not what everybody's path looks like. And how do I find ways to be more inclusive on that path? So my mom has been a huge inspiration, and her stroke, while I would never, ever say, I wish I could have an experience in my life of trauma so that I could learn from it. We never wish for this shit, right? We don't attract
Right.
the bad things that happen. But God, yeah, I totally now understand the gift of my mom's stroke, and it awakened me to like so much awareness of privilege and just my body being able-bodied, like just just again living in this body, what that entitles me to have and do and be, and then understanding when that is not what someone else has, what how that shifts the social construct and the societal communal responsibility of care in a family, right, and all the pressures that puts on ourselves, and just bringing that nuanced lens to this work of coaching where it can get so love and light and airy fairy and like so many things that we hear or accidentally even perpetuate in our industry that are like we attract everything. No, no, we don't attract everything. I actually, someone posted that yesterday and I was like, my mom didn't attract sexual trauma, she didn't attract a stroke, I didn't manifest those things in my life because of my energy or my beliefs. You know, these outcomes for many, many people are as a result of historic lack of access to healthcare services, mental health, all the things that you talk about so beautifully in your work as a mental health advocate is what leads different communities to have these traumatic experiences. And while we can embrace the lessons and our resilience and how we've overcome our challenges, we also have to look at what the hell happened and how did these things continue to happen to our communities, you know? So that's a long ass answer to how did I get to do this work. But the final straw that happened was after I took my mom back home from the hospital, realizing I now have to care for this
Mhm.
elder. I lost my job right when I went back to work at UC Berkeley. And I was
Wow.
already like sort of half into not feeling that position at that historically
Yeah.
white institution, right? And all the ways it was really rubbing my edges of me wanting to be fully expressed and be myself and knowing like I'm always getting in trouble and it's just a matter of time. And then ultimately I got laid off. And it was the universe just being like, listen, I've been listening to you and I heard that you're not really that down with this job, and so I'm going to release you from this. But at the time, I was like, wait, what? I have a brand
Yeah.
new baby. I got to care for my mom. I need this insurance. I need this plan or all this legal BS. I thought I had all this valuable stuff coming from that institution that I depended on them for my salary, stability, and
Mhm.
then you know it was already like the universe was like, how much more do I have to show you for you to know what you're capable of stepping into? Like just pay attention. And so that
Absolutely.
what I thought was the rug got pulled out from under me, but it wasn't the rug. It was the freaking oppression. It was like I hated that job at the end of the day. Like when I really think about it, I wasn't really happy there. And the universe was like, I'm gonna give you an out. And that's when I decided to launch my business and figure out how to integrate all the things that I care about and all my values into being someone that helps other people grow their own business and make money in ways that are feeling aligned with their values, right? And how they think about capitalism as a multifaceted, multi-headed beast that we can look to as a way to create freedom and independence and opportunity for some, but also very problematic because it doesn't necessarily work the same for everyone. It wasn't designed to. So all that stuff comes from my upbringing, from seeing it from that perspective, and then from the work I did in the developing world, and living and working in Central and South America, and seeing, for me, the most important lesson as an American is
Mhm.
leave America and realize that the fable, the construct of America, what we've been taught and shown and preached to in the books and in the stories and in the images, is a mirage. What America really is, the
Absolutely.
real picture, when you go from outside in, is just not pretty. It's not
Yep.
such a lovely tale of freedom and independence and opportunity for all. And I got to see that living and working in other countries that had been directly harmed and directly affected by the United States role in the world, right? So the harm and the oppression that
Oh my
occurs in
God,
our
you're hitting
country
everything.
is just like a sliver of the harm and oppression that we perpetuate as a colonialist nation around
Yep.
the globe. And there are so many new forms of colonialism that we're
Mhm.
engaged in that
Mhm.
involve
Mhm. Mhm.
what we've always done, right? Which is the thing we all have to think about, which is this idea that we're entitled to take whatever we think we want, resources, or using humans as labor,
Absolutely.
with the thought that
Yeah.
there's no recourse, right? But the reality is,
It works, Colin. That's the job, and we're all trained, socialized, right, to reinforce colonization in our life and in our business. Um, and one of the things, as you were sharing and sharing your story, just even your transition story, like your mom being the inspiration, seeing her story and seeing her not give a fuck attitude, inspiring you to bring that same concept into your business, and then seeing what you, some folks would call it the catalytic event, right? That led you from leaving Berkeley so you can walk in your calling, and then hearing you just explicitly name capital colonization and trauma in your work is powerful. It's transformative. And as someone who's worked with you, who's been a part of your programs, you really guide folks to disrupting the BS, getting to the truth of their own story and their own journey to be leaders of social transformation. And that's what I appreciate about you, Brigette. And thank you for sharing so raw and vulnerably with the folks who are watching live. We're all a bunch of strangers on the internet,
yeah,
but the fact that you're bringing your full self into your business and teaching other people to do that and not give a fuck is amazing. So I just wanted to kind of interject and just say that really quickly, um, because I see you and I see the offer that you're bringing into the world. One of the things too that really drew me to you is this notion of you, no BS, no BS business, no BS advice. And I kept seeing you promote this, and I'm like, what is this? No BS business. What does that mean?
yeah.
What does that mean, Bridget? Like, what do you mean, no BS?
Oh my God. It's so interesting because you spoke to it a moment ago. There's so many layers of the bullshit, right? When I think about bullshit, I think about how we've been colonized, acculturated, quote, educated to think and interact in certain ways that we believe are the correct or the societally accepted ways of being. And a lot of it has to do with a process of unlearning, or some people who are experts will use the term decolonize. I'm not an expert in decolonization, but Tanya Rodriguez, who's a Black
Mhm.
Puerto Rican woman who I'm, starting to learn from, really does a beautiful job of talking about how it's painful and ugly and it's not comfortable work to understand how much bullshit we have been raised with and internalized. And that starts at the level of just the stories we have about ourselves. And it's not to denigrate. I mean, I say it in a tongue in cheek way. Like, a lot of the bullshit that I inherited as a half Puerto Rican woman are
Mhm.
narratives of struggle, of responsibility as a woman. Like, you don't put your old people in a care home porque eso es bien feo y eso no se hace y eso no se hace como una hija buena. Like, you're not a good girl, a good daughter.
Mhm.
And so that's a perfect example of the first level of bullshit, which is like my own programming the narration, the stories, the beliefs that I hold about what I'm supposed to do and how I'm supposed to be in the world, and understanding like the complexity of where we got our ideas about ourselves. Are we people of color that had our own stories and our own ways of thinking that were decimated or torn or broken? And then what other stories were imposed? Like, I mean, I don't mean to offend folks that are Christian or that believe and have a faith system, but I do need to call and name out the taking of the words of God and the Bible and religion, and creating this very convenient construct of stories about the people who are God's servants, the idle hands, the God's chosen being the poor, and all these pobre and humilde. And in Spanish, we have a million words to use that being good, humble, hardworking, struggling humans makes us closer to God. And I'm telling you that God is literally up there going, I did not fucking say that.
Exactly.
Literally, like, that's not what I said. Or she is literally like,
I was like, in my head, I was supposed to mean she didn't say it.
I'm like, she's literally like, that is a total misappropriation and a distortion of my words, right? Those words were taken and used to control and subjugate. Every group of people has been subjugated, right? And some groups have been oppressed more than others. So there's so many layers of programming. And then there's the programming of like the things that we seek out or think are good or powerful or attractive are all things that are related to dominant culture: white, male, heteronormative, cisgendered, able-bodied, power dominant culture. That is the model that everything we do, we measure against, not realizing that that model is not actually like the global majority. It doesn't actually reflect who we are as humans. But we don't understand that the ways we think and orient, like I'm supposed to be skinny, I'm supposed to be blonde, I'm supposed to do business like this, power equals that, or to be successful means this or that. All these constructs we have are like a sliver for one group of people, and they don't really necessarily reflect the depth and breadth of humanity and what really matters for all of us. And so it's this process of dismantling that bullshit, starting with ourselves, to then thinking about how we relate to others, and then how do we judge and evaluate and measure, whether knowingly or unknowingly, who do we look to as our leaders and our teachers? Who do we buy from? How do we sell? Why do we purchase? What influences our decisions? Like for me, the bullshit in business, so much of it has to do with like male, patriarchal, dominant, coercive ways of selling things that people may or may not want or need. But we use all these techniques to tap into neuro branding and neuropsychosis and getting people to think about what they need. And it's a lot of it has to do with like copious overconsumption and just like buying things for the sake of buying. And it gets really complicated, because then when you start to think about like, how do I do this better? How do I do this in integrity? It is not like, oh, there's one simple cookie cutter formula. And like, I'm not here to say like, oh, I've got it figured out. I do a business with no bullshit. I'm sure there's all kinds of bullshit still that's interwoven, even with the best of intentions. So we have to do a lot of conscious, intentional work, starting with ourselves, to think about, like, even just if you're, for example, a coach or an expert. I will use the example of people in my community, which tends to be people of color, right? So just because of who I am and the values I stand for, I attract two kinds of people. I attract people of color who are already disruptors, who have already been on a mission around social and racial justice, and it's the work that they do in the world, but they're doing it within the encasing of being an entrepreneur, much like Maisha or Trudy LeBron or Lisa Denon Young or any of these folks that ultimately are anti-racism, decolonization, social justice advocates, but they're doing it as a business versus as a nonprofit or another form, which are all fine, but they've chosen the path of business, right? Most of the folks I work with, like myself, we came to this work not because we're like, I'm building a business just to make money.
Exactly. We came to serve.
So that's the first piece of disrupting bullshit, is like, we have to come from a really authentic place of like, why are we actually building the business, or why are we doing, because if it's just about making money, it's very problematic, and it's going to take us down a whole path of doing disingenuine things out of integrity, because the sole goal, the sole purpose is just to generate money or revenue, right? So we have to start there. And then we have to think about beyond the why. So we have to have that really deep, purposeful, authentic why. Then it's like the what and the how. Like, how do we actually build a business and charge for our services and earn well and allow ourselves, right, to earn well in a way that feels aligned? And I know for some of us, we've done a lot of work around overcoming scarcity or the fear or the inhibition about charging premium prices for our services. Yep. Because we were raised with narratives, or in my case, I associated making money with doing sketchy, weird white people things. Like, literally, I had a certain vision of marketing, sales, and business. And I worked in the legal profession. I worked like down in Wall Street. And I remember just thinking like, ugh, like this for me feels just like toxic, nasty soup. Like, I don't want to swim in this soup. So I already had a whole visceral thing with business. Yeah. Which in Spanish, you would use the term uy. Uy. Like, uy is like, get it off of me. Like, I need to take a bath, right? So, and many of us have that. And so we have to, once again, unlearn and reconfigure with engaging around business as a force for social good, and business that can be done in integrity. And we actually get to be abundant and earn good money doing good work. And if we're worried about being greedy, money hungry capitalists and hoarding and taking all the things for ourselves, then there are ways to remedy that, like having a social impact, social benefit business model. Like Maisha has Brown Sisters Speak and 10,000 other things that her business, I mean, just one of 10 million things that her business, yes, her business funds the business of Maisha's life and Maisha's children and Maisha's family. But beyond that, her business funds programs and initiatives that benefit people who historically don't have the same access to resources that some of her privileged clients do have. So for me, business can be a powerful vehicle to redistribute wealth and capital and balance the scales if we're creative, intentional, and really strategic about how we design our business. Is it going to be perfect? Once again, no. No, there is no perfect capitalist construct way of doing business. There's always going to be some level of something that's off or some format of something that's not 100% because it's capitalism, right? But there are ways to do it differently and do it better. And there's a critical mass in this. Like, the more of us that are in a position to rethink how we're using business and entrepreneurship as a way to generate and move money and bring it into communities and causes and activities that directly benefit the most historically oppressed groups, we can rework this system. Because I'm here to disrupt the bullshit. Once again, disrupting the bullshit is the idea that there's like not enough money in the system or there's not enough for everyone. No. There is more than enough for everybody. It's just concentrated over here. And so I'm like, well, how am I going to get that and bring it all the way over around the system in all these different ways? Because there's tons of money in the system. Absolutely. Right? This country is like booming with commerce that comes from COVID. The story that like we're in a recession. Well, we're in a recession for everyday working class, blue collar people that have restaurants and local businesses. Absolutely. They are screwed. They are in a recession. But big pharma and big tech are like rolling in the dough right now. Yep. Right? Yep. And now we're getting technical. But like, if you're an entrepreneur and you're like, how do I find money? You have to think about who holds money and who holds that capital. And do they have problems? Do they still have needs? Because another thing I've learned, I read a really great book called The Soul of Money, which blew my mind, which talked about the source of poverty is not poor people. This book was like, poor people are not the reason for poverty. Rich people that are afraid of not having enough riches and holding on to more and more and having scarcity and trauma themselves of like lack, their own form of different kind of trauma, not sharing resources is part of what creates this lack. So I'm of the mindset, hurt people unhappy
People.
people, they cause more harm. Do I only want to help people of privilege? No, that's not what I'm on this earth for. But I can certainly help a percentage of people of privilege to do less harm as well in helping them. And I'm allowing them to pay me
Absolutely.
handsomely to solve a problem for them. And then they are willingly aware and knowing that that money might get paid forward in ways that they themselves wouldn't actually know how to do or have the time to do, nor should they do it, right? Because again, we have to think about not causing additional harm. So like me, I'm not a trauma informed mental health expert for Black people. Why would I
Position myself that way.
do anything around that? Like that's not my work, but Maisha has a program and she's got other experts and she's got it all worked out. That's her domain.
Right.
So why don't I just figure out ways as an example of how we do this? Maisha and I will like partner together and figure out a way to have people that can afford some type of service or program that for them money is not an issue. And then we just move that opportunity and that money into another cause. And so for me, that's all the layers of bullshit. Disrupting it within yourself, your mindset, what you've learned, unlearning it, and then rethinking everything about how you're doing your business and how to recreate a new construct for doing business in ways that are inclusive, that heal, that pay it forward, that support and create opportunity for communities that historically have been left out of the game or been stolen from or just don't have the same access.
That's it. And you're hitting the nails. You're saying so many different things, but the word that keeps coming up is disrupt. And I know you have something coming up using disrupt and the importance of disruption. And next week you have the Disruption Unconference. Why are we having a Disruption Unconference?
Because there's a lot of things in the status quo and what we're used to, the way we do business in our industries, that is causing harm, that is perpetuating harm. And there are a lot of good, well-meaning, kind-hearted people that are still causing or perpetuating harm, myself included, which is why we need to do the work to learn from people who are truly experts in helping us disrupt the harm or the ways that we're doing work in certain industries, right? So these industries that this event is really focused on, because this is my world, these are the people I work with, this is what I'm around, is coaches, healers, spiritual leaders, thought leaders, experts, speakers, people that have courses and books, who are consultants, these folks that sell services or programs. In some cases, they're nonprofit leaders too.
Yeah.
And we all have the goal to serve, uplift, transform, and help people from an intention perspective, right? So we're going to do a quick little separating our intentions from our impact. So when I set up my conference, I had an intention to do everything perfectly. And then I had a call with my good friend Lisa Denon Young yesterday and realized the actual impact of how I was doing things was very different than my intentions. So you've ever heard the saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions?
Oh, absolutely. We just talked about that.
We can't really build our industries around this idea that we have the intention to be good people and to serve and to help. We actually have to do the work to disrupt the patterns that we've acquired unknowingly that still perpetuate and cause harm. A lot of those patterns or things that need to be disrupted have to do with not having an awareness of an informed lens or a way of looking at things through an understanding of justice, racial justice, equity, social justice, the true nature of diversity and inclusion. So we start with diversity and inclusion. Like, we all want to have more diverse businesses, or we want to serve diverse people, but can we actually serve those people in a way that truly includes and honors them, and then go even further to say it doesn't harm them and it is restorative and treats them in ways that are actually bringing back into balance the ways that certain groups have been historically harmed and continue to be harmed, right? So we may be perpetuating some of these things. Again, I will say this 100 times. Me, you, anyone watching, we can be good humans and have good hearts and the best intentions, and we can still cause harm. And we have to let go of the shame or the fear in
Get it.
acknowledging and addressing that, right? So the ways we might cause harm would be things like spiritual bypass, which we're going to address at the conference, which Alexis Douglas speaks to beautifully. Eva Cruz Peña speaks beautifully to the idea of sacred inclusion, which is not spiritually bypassing difficult conversations or other people's lived experiences. Understanding that true spirituality is at the intersection of the love and the light and the high vibration, which is beautiful, but it's also on the side of the anger and the sacred rage and the darkness and the ugliness and the fear and all the things that all people get to experience, but in particular, Black, brown, indigenous, queer, non-able-bodied, neurodivergent people get to be fucking pissed at the system if they want to be, and they are not less spiritual. And that idea of more or less spiritual based on a certain appearance or way of being or showing up is part of perpetuating the same stuff. So we have to do the work to understand and then disrupt it in ways that allow us to still feel relatively grounded and relatively safe. But even that idea of safety, I want to call it out and say, we hear all the time, emotional safety. I got to be safe. I don't feel safe, right? Well, guess what?
You can walk outside of your house and not be safe. There is a myth of safety, and we keep wanting to create safe spaces. But me and my Black body, Bridget, I am not safe. Oh, sorry. See, I'm going in. Let me calm down.
No, you're not. You're not. Right? And I don't know what that feels like. I don't know what a Black mother, and I said this to a white spiritual woman the other day. She wanted to have a conversation with me about sacred rage. And then I told her what makes me angry. And then she couldn't hold the space around the conversation. That's bypass. Yep. I said, what I feel angry about, and this is where I get conflicted, is I don't know what it's like to be a Black mom and send my boy out to a play date or something and think, is he going to get hurt? Is he not going to come home to me for a certain reason? For a specific reason? Would he be targeted or harmed for a different reason? And that is something that I can feel a certain level of anger around, but it's different. Like, I don't know that visceral experience of myself feeling like I'm being targeted or treated differently because of the way I look. And so why would I feel that I have a right to tell Maisha, well, Maisha, why do you need to be so angry about that, for example? Or why do you have to speak about it like that? Like, I remember when I first started leaning into the work when I moved to California, I would listen to someone like Maisha or Catrice Jackson or Louisa Duran, and I'll be like, why are they talking to me like that? I'm a good white person. Why are they yelling at me? Why are they saying, stay in your lane, or whatever was the thing that triggered me? And I would get all twisted up in my game and thinking, why can't they be this way or that way? Or I don't know which way, I thought in my mind, a different way about the way they feel. And now I've come to the realization of like, oh, that didn't have anything to do with them. That had to do with me. My own internal contortion of like, why am I uncomfortable when Black women speak their truth unapologetically or get angry and speak out? What is it about this in me that is causing me to feel angry or uncomfortable or defensive? There's something here, because if I'm completely unattached from this, I wouldn't have a reaction, right? But again, this is deepening into this awakening of disrupting and thinking about all the ways we've gotten used to being that might feel familiar or safe in one context. And then when we're out of that context, we're like out of our footing and it feels unsafe, but we're not. We're okay.
Exactly.
We're okay. We can be really fucking uncomfortable and still be okay. And that's why I think there's a lot of harm in kind of some of the work that happens in the coaching and the healing around this constant need, especially among us white folks, for emotional safety. Like, why does my emotional safety always trump other people's physical safety or human rights or civil rights?
Well, it's, we can go a lot deeper about this, and I might have to bring you back so we can go deep and go back. And we had a workshop last night on boundaries, and you're in the lounge, so you'll get to check it out. And White folks aren't aware of the physical boundaries that they have. They demand the boundary of emotional safety and safety, period. And white folks don't have to be mindful of the space that they take up. So the demand for safe space in their containers, right, is the exception. It allows them the spiritual bypass. It allows them to move away from discomfort. But the invitation, I think, Brigette, as we talk about your upcoming conference, is the invitation to lean into the discomfort, accept the tension of non-closure and non-resolve, and stop demanding that whiteness and white comfort is necessary to engage in hard conversations.
And I'm going to also drop a little bomb of something interesting here. We, as white people, will still benefit from doing this work. We will become better leaders.
Yep.
We will become better in our relationships. And we will actually suffer less ourselves while simultaneously causing less harm. So it is a win-win opportunity when we do this work to disrupt. And think about, the conference is going to address the disruption at 3 different layers. The first layer is the layer at which Maisha and other experts like herself will speak to, which is this idea of how to become more justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion informed, anti-racism informed, racial justice informed, so that we cause and perpetuate less harm. But we ourselves suffer from not having that informed lens and not being justice informed leaders. Lisa Denon Young is going to do an incredible workshop around that too. Maisha is going to be facilitating a really powerful, deep panel conversation, a very nuanced conversation with different women of color with different perspectives on how to do this work. So this is not this monolithic, we're not selling one cookie cutter way of doing this or one framework or there's one solution. There are many nuances, even between and among the panelists and the speakers. You're going to see a nuance of ways that they approach this work, and you're going to find a way to do this work to meet you where you are and bring you to the next step. And then in the bucket around business, we're going to talk about making money. So I want to make sure you know that this is a business conference, and we're going to talk about marketing and sales and branding. And we're going to have powerful women of color like Jennifer Kem and Kat Kim and Asha D. Ramakrishna, who's my Venezolana sister, who also happens to be South Asian, and who's going to talk about the intersection of money and spirituality. And so we're going to talk about how to make money and grow a business in integrity. And then we're also going to talk about the work of spiritual healing and spiritual coaching and monetizing those transformational services in a way that don't perpetuate harm, spiritual bypass, and that make sure that we're honoring and giving back to the cultures that we borrow or take from, and making sure that we are not appropriating or misusing things that don't come from our own heritage. And how do we do this in greater in integrity? Because as a collective, if we were just to take folks in those coaching, healing industries, and if each of us could do better with the number of people that we impact and influence in our sphere, this impact can be ripple force, magnitude. If each of us that attended this event invited 2 or 3 other white women, spiritual healers, coaches, and I want to be clear here, I'm Latina, and you don't have to be white to also perpetuate harm and oppression. I'm going to say again, some slightly uncomfortable shit here. People of color, all of us, including Black people, we've all been colonized, and we all have to do the work, or we can still perpetuate the harm. Absolutely. Me too, right? As Latinos, we have colorism, we have all sorts of orientations. It's in every culture, right? Black people have it, we have it. So this conference is for all of us to do this work in community. We are going to do the work. Folks like Maisha and other facilitators that have expertise are going to center and make it safer for the folks with the most marginalized identities. And we're going to center and ensure those voices are the ones that we are really tuning into. But we're also going to create courageous space and honor meeting anybody that comes to this conference wherever that they're at. And we're not here to shame you or blame you or put you down. Come as you are, and we're going to get in the soup together, and we're going to take the steps to figure out what's my next step. Moving past the discomfort into embracing the shift, the unraveling, the up-leveling, the thinking about how do I continue to deepen into this work. For me personally, I'll give you an example. I'm working on my anger am working on my own sacred rage and making sure that, as some incredible Latino women I've worked with in the past who are healers have told me, that I don't burn people
Yep.
with my fire and my desire to change. Right.
Yep.
I'm constantly working on. So I want invite everybody into like a space of where are you feeling into? What is your next level of work? For some of us, it's calming the anger or figuring out how to engage more softly in the work. For some of us, it's engaging with the sacred rage, having uncomfortable conversations, getting out of the mindset that we always have to be seen as good and kind and gentle and easy, and we don't want to ruffle feathers, because dismantling and disrupting the bullshit is not comfortable work. It's not always happening in the love and light, and it's not always going to feel good. So like Lisa Denon Young says, normalize it, normalize the journey, embrace it, and get comfortable and clear on your resilience, that we're capable of moving through this discomfort, because it's the only way through. Comfort is what keeps us complacent, and it's what's kept the system in place. We all benefit from it, me included.
Exactly.
And we have to all do the work collectively to disrupt it. It's going to take a massive fucking village.
Oh, absolutely. And so I love y'all. I love you, Brigette. I said y'all.
Love you.
Make sure you click the link to sign up for the Disruption Unconference. Brigette, make sure you guys follow Brigette. We'll drop more links here on YouTube. We'll drop more links in the comments. Stay tuned. Please, please, please sign up. Brigette, thank you so much for coming live.
Thank you for holding the space as always.
I'm going to bring you back on again. But I got to go, because I got to go to the CYP conference where co-conspirators are living into the work.
Yes.
Brigette for being here. We'll follow up with all of you guys. We did put the link in the comments for the conference. Register. I'm excited to be a part of the Jedi panel. And until next week, you guys keep living into the work of anti-racism. Bye, friends. Thank you,
everybody.